Hello, this is Domenico with NOMICS, and we're going to look at tax incidence again and how this relates to PED and PES. In the previous video, we looked at who carries the burden of the tax when the PED value is less than the PES value, and we looked at cigarettes as an example and how smokers or consumers of cigarettes carry that burden because they are addicted to the product, and as the price rises due to a tax, they continue to smoke with a slight decrease in the quantity demanded. In this video, we're going to look at luxury taxes to highlight what happens when the PED value is greater than the PES value. There's a degree of debate regarding the effectiveness of a luxury tax because, in theory, luxuries have a PED that is greater than 1 and a YED that is greater than 1. So any increase in price would lead to a significantly larger decrease in the quantity demanded. Unless, of course, in theory, if the luxury good is a Veblen good, and perhaps I can create another video to discuss that, even though it's not on the IB syllabus. A Veblen good is a situation where the demand curve is actually upward sloping, where demand increases as price increases because the luxury good is considered a status symbol, and the higher the price, the scarcer it becomes for consumers, and so those who have it have prestige. Let's apply a historical example. Let's look at the United States. And in 1991, we can see here that the US Congress enacted a luxury tax signed by President H.W. Bush. And the goal was to raise federal tax revenue of about, here we see, $9 billion. And they were going to place a 10% luxury tax on boats or yachts exceeding $100,000, or cars exceeding $30,000, or aircraft exceeding $250,000, and furs and jewelry over $10,000. So any buyer of these goods would pay an additional 10%, and that 10% would then go to the federal government in the hopes of raising $9 billion. As economists, you can probably, with your knowledge, know that it probably was not going to be very effective just as a result of the theory behind the price elasticity of demand. And not surprisingly, and I'm sure there were economists saying, I told you so, that only 2 years after the imposition of this luxury tax, at the behest of the luxury yacht industry, Bill Clinton eliminated the luxury tax and cited that it was having a negative effect on the yacht industry, leading to decreased quantity, or maybe perhaps decreased quantity supplied or decreased supply, leading to loss of jobs in that industry. So let's go ahead and graph this. So here we have graph A, and we're going to look at the US market for yachts. And remember, from that example, yachts priced at over $100,000, all right, anything over $100,000 or more was receiving a 10% tax. Remember that tax incidence is essentially meaning who carries the burden of the tax, the consumer or the producer. With yachts, since it's a luxury, we know that luxury goods have a price elasticity of demand that is greater than 1, meaning that the percent change in quantity demanded will be greater than the percent change in price. So as price goes up, there should be a significantly greater decrease in the quantity demanded. So for example, if PED was equal to 2.5, let's say the PED value for yachts was 2.5, PED is the percent change in quantity demanded over the percent change in price. So that means that for every 1% increase in price, there would be a 2.5% decrease in the quantity demanded, a greater decrease in the quantity demanded versus the change in price, right? In addition, we know as economists that luxury goods have a YED value that's greater than 1, meaning that the percent change in quantity will be greater than percent change in income. So if income, let's say that the YED value for yachts is 1.5%. All right, it's percent change in quantity over the percent change in income. So if income increases by 1%, we should see a 1.5% increase in demand for yachts, and vice versa. If incomes fell by 1%, then the quantity demand should fall by 1.5%. All right, so that's a little bit of a review of elasticity. Now let's look at the supply curve. We're going to assume this to be the case. We're going to assume that the price elasticity of supply for yachts is less than 1, where the percent change in quantity supplied is less than the percent change in price. And we perhaps can assume this because yachts are custom-made vehicles. They're not mass-produced on an assembly line. It takes time to acquire the resources, acquire the skilled artisans to build the yacht, etc., and thus it's inelastic. So we're going to assume that to be the case. Perhaps length of time and the mobility of factors of production are all contributors to keeping it inelastic. So when we compare the value of PED and PES for luxury goods such as yachts, we're going to state that the PED value is greater than the PES value. And if that's the case, whichever curve is more inelastic, which is the supply curve here, they are going to carry the burden of the tax. Okay, so since the PES is less than the PED, the producer of yachts or of the luxury good will carry the tax burden. Okay? So here we have our graph, our inelastic supply curve for yachts, our downward sloping demand curve. For yachts, supply is equal to the marginal cost of production, demand equal to the marginal benefit, and where S1 equals D1, it provides our equilibrium price at point A, establishing that intersection point A, which provides the equilibrium price at PE, and equilibrium quantity at QE, where quantity supplied equals quantity demanded. So then that 10% tax is applied. So let's go ahead and illustrate that. We're going to exaggerate that to an extent. So we're just going to assume that it is a per unit tax, just for the sake of simplicity. And the supply curve is going to shift in by the amount of that tax. It's an added cost of production. And this will be S2 equals S1 plus the luxury tax. Okay? And that will set a new equilibrium here, where S2 equals D1 at point B. And we can go ahead and draw our new price for the consumer and the decreased quantity as a result. So here we have the quantity, and I'll say that's the quantity with the luxury tax. And then this will be the increased price paid by the consumer. And then we're going to go down here and highlight along the original supply curve the price received by the producer. So this will be PP for price received by the producer. Okay? Now we can see that this rectangular area is the tax revenue. Price paid by consumer minus the price received by the producer is the size of the tax. Okay, just to highlight that the distance between here and here is the value of the tax. Price paid by the consumer minus the price received by the producer, the distance between the two is the tax itself. Okay, this is a little bit of a review. So let's go ahead and label some areas. So here we have area A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, and I. Okay, and let's go ahead and make some notes. Okay. All right. So we already know how to analyze this. I already have previous videos that explain that, and perhaps I'll just quickly do it here. So here we have graph A, the U.S. market for yachts. We have a downward sloping demand curve labeled D1, which is equal to our marginal benefit. We have two upward sloping supply curves in accordance to the law of supply, equal to S1, which is equal to our marginal cost of production. and then S2 is equal to S1 plus the luxury tax, where S1 equals D1 provides the equilibrium price at PE, equilibrium quantity at QE. And then the government steps in, seeking to raise federal tax revenue by $9 billion. So they apply a 10% tax on boats priced over $100,000. And that causes the supply curve to shift in by the amount of the tax. It's an added cost of production to S2. And where S2 equals D1 at point B, it sets a new equilibrium price paid by consumers at PC and a decreased quantity at Q tax. Now we can notice again that the percent change in quantity demanded, the decrease here is significantly greater than the increase in price. All right, price went up by a small margin, but we see a significant drop in the quantity demanded, which is expected when we see an elastic demand curve. So the percent change in quantity demanded greater than the percent change in price, again highlighting that the PED value is less than 1. All right, so price paid by consumers, right? Consumers pay a higher price because it rises from PE to PC, so price goes up for the consumer, and the price received by the producer falls because it was originally PE and then it falls to PP, price received by the producer. So less price received by the producer. In addition, we see that the total revenue falling for the producer. So the producer had total revenue, originally total revenue 1, which is equal to PE times QE, which is this rectangular area here. So total amount of money that the yacht firms were making, and then it's reduced because now they're receiving a lower price, selling a lower quantity, and so they have less total revenue, and as a result they will have to decrease the quantity supplied and fire labor, thus leading to unemployment in the yacht industry. Okay, now let's look at the impact on stakeholders. Oh, let me go ahead and finish those notes. So total revenue after total revenue 2 is equal to price received by the producer multiplied by the quantity at tax. And we can clearly see that the total revenue before the tax was greater than the total revenue after the tax. Okay. So let's highlight a few points about consumer surplus. So consumer surplus before the tax was equal to areas A, B, C, D. A plus B plus C plus D. And then consumer surplus, I'll abbreviate that, consumer surplus after the luxury tax is now equal to just area A because the price has risen. So there's less kind of savings for the consumer, and then consumers lose areas B, C, and D. For the producer surplus before the luxury tax, it was equal to areas E, F, G, H, and I. E plus F plus G plus H plus I. And then producer surplus after the luxury tax has been reduced to, let's see here, H and I. My mistake, sorry. H plus I. Okay, so just to highlight that so we can clearly see that. This was the producer surplus before the luxury tax. And then we'll see that it has been reduced to area H and I. So less surplus, kind of less profit for the firm. Great. So let's go ahead and leave that area. And let's label this reduced producer surplus area of A. And then let's go ahead and highlight the welfare loss of D and G. This is the lost consumption. This is the lost production So D and G represent the welfare loss of the tax. We can make a note about that. The welfare loss, or the deadweight loss, is equal to areas D plus G. And then we're left with the tax revenue. Tax revenue composed of B plus C plus E plus F. All right. Government tax revenue equal to areas B plus C plus E plus F. Of this tax revenue, we can see that the consumer carries the burden of B plus C. All right, so the consumer burden is just this boxed area here. Whereas the producer burden is much greater. It's areas E and F. So clearly we can see that the yacht producing industry is worse off as a result of this luxury tax. So we can go ahead and make a note about that. And then that's it for this video, highlighting the impact of elasticity of demand versus supply in regards to the imposition of a tax and who carries the burden. All right, so the tax revenue, again, is equal to areas B plus C plus E plus F, right? But the consumer burden of the tax is just equal to areas B plus C, whereas the producer burden of the tax, of the luxury tax, is equal to areas E plus F. So we can clearly see that the producer losing areas E and F, that area is greater than the lost consumer area of B plus C. So the producer carries the burden. And they carry the burden of the tax because their supply curve is more inelastic than the demand curve, because the PES is more inelastic than the PED. And that is it. So don't forget to comment if you have any questions, and like and subscribe. And don't forget that in the information section of this video, I have a full outline of the analysis and kind of the evaluation of this model and the impact on the consumer producer with this luxury tax. Thank you so much, and that's it.